Vacuum tubes. They're still a thing. So let's build a module with one. Not knowing anything about vacuum tubes, I bought a ECC832 and a base to mount it. This tube has two triodes, a low gain and a high gain. I figured that I could do something more interesting with this tube than a tube with two identical stages. The base not plugging into a breadboard, like an integrated circuit, the first thing I did was to solder some pin header to the base so that I could prototype it in a breadboard more easily. And I mounted an LED to the base just to add some flare. And there we go, right into the breadboard so that I can figure out what to do with it. The glow from the LED looks way better in person. Powering up the tube, after an initial inrush of almost half an amp, the filament draws about 170 milliamps at 12 volts. The first circuit I breadboarded using this tube was a spring reverb. This used the low gain triode to drive the input coil of the reverb tank and the high gain triode to recover the signal. And you know what? It worked. And it sounded exactly like the module I built a while ago using transistors and op-amps. So that wouldn't make for an interesting video. That's when I decided to go with an Overdrive wave shaper type of module. This is because I know I can get a good result and that it doesn't sound like the solid state equivalent. And honestly, if you're going to the effort of using a tube, you want it to have a sound that would be hard to replicate without it. So I took apart the reverb circuit and breadboarded this, and it worked great on the breadboard. So much so that I built it into a complete module. And then I tested it, and it sounded boring. I still had the breadboard, so I checked what I built on the circuit against the breadboard, and it all seemed the same. So I decided to tweak the circuit until I got the results I wanted, which gives us this schematic. Now let's go over how it works. Input signal comes in here. This potentiometer controls the drive level into the grid on the low gain side of the tube. And the amplified signal comes out the cathode of the tube here. It goes through another potentiometer, which does two things. Just the level of the output on the module here, and it sets the level of the drive for the second triode circuit here. That output goes through another op-amp to remove DC bias and lower the output impedance. The output is then tamed down a little bit with these resistors and sent out the second output jack here. And for completeness, here's the housekeeping parts of the circuit. Now let's build it. The video of this process was done using this schematic. However, by the time the module went into the rack, it was modified to be this schematic that we discussed in detail. Laser cutting the faceplate. Engraving the PCB. Into the ferric chloride it goes. Perfectly etched every time. Now to glue some fiberboard onto the faceplate to have a mounting spot for the tube socket. Putting all the parts on the faceplate. Assembling the circuit board. And mounting the circuit board to the faceplate. Now after some testing and modification, into the rack it goes. Let's hear the dry signal. And now let's give it some distortion through the tube. Well, there you go, an Overdrive wave shaper module using a vacuum tube. Hope you all enjoyed, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.